Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of What's the Point, the podcast that helps you find meaning and fulfillment for your work and daily life through the eyes of exceptional people that I've got to know, and none other than Simon Dewis, who I know through the coaching community and specifically the Gallup coaching community. And Simon is just an enchanting gentleman. I am so privileged to know you, Simon. I'm just going to give a brief introduction before I invite you to, because yours will be way better than mine. But Simon has been incredible in offering himself, and what I know of Simon is he is so other-centered, so giving to others, and comes alive in that place. So I was really excited to interview Simon for this podcast because I knew his views, his perspective, his content, his ideas would be so riveting for our listeners. So Simon Dewis, it is fantastic that you're here. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Please do introduce yourself better than I did.
Well, I'm not too sure I could. I think I'm going to ask you to be my agent, actually. So, so we obviously know each other through the coaching community and through the Clifton Strengths Gallup community. But just to give an overview, so Simon Dewis, I work for one of the largest global logistics companies. Been there for 34 years this year, actually. I've done lots of various roles. In those 34 years, I've been a manager for 27 years. I've worked in sales environments and led sales teams. I've worked in operations, process design, strategy design. And then in the last sort of like 8 or 9 years, I've found myself in the world of IT.
Simon, and so leading people in all spheres, in all environments has really got you where you are today, and I'm truly grateful to know you. So as you know me, I don't like to mess around. I like to go straight into the heartbeat of the matter. So let's begin with the first question. Simon, what is the point of your life?
Okay, well, straight in there with the sucker punch one. To be honest, it's still work in progress. If I'm going to be totally honest with you, I think it's something that's been evolving in my head for quite a while. But over the last few years, I have probably given this a little bit more thought than previously. Maybe that's because I'm now 54 and I'm starting to reflect back on life and whatever. But as I've sort of like thought about this and the different roles that I've done in terms of management, I have sort of like identified a bit of a common thread through, what's the point of my life. And for me, it's around this statement of helping teams and individuals grow through collaboration. Now, either that's me collaborating with those individuals or helping the teams to collaborate with them amongst themselves. So for me, that's one of the sort of like the main points of my life, and it's something I have given quite a lot of thought to, and I just wanted to share with you that about 4 or 5 years ago, I started to design the concept of a personal brand board, and that's why I've been able to sort of like have it in that succinct statement, because I've been working on that brand board concept for quite a while, and I've been sort of like articulating it and tweaking it over the years. But yeah, it comes down to that statement for me about helping teams and individuals grow through collaboration.
And Simon, I know, not only is that, as you say, a work in progress, but at the moment, the point of your life, that growth through collaboration, because as I said, you're so open to people and helping them develop. It's just naturally how you're wired up. And then in all of this that you're doing at the moment, Simon, I know you're in IT at the moment, but from your perspective, what trends and or issues are you seeing within people?
This is only my own personal view, and I want to come at this from a slightly different angle. Actually, is I don't know if this is trends, because I haven't got any real historical data around this. But as someone that continually likes to learn and challenge myself and think about different situations, I've actually been doing quite a lot of reading around the concepts of careers and what people are trying to get from their careers. And through this sort of like this reading, it's led into lots of conversations over the last sort of like 6 months with lots of people within my own personal network to establish, what are the sort of like things that are important to individuals when it comes to their careers. And I've made some notes on this over that sort of like 6-month period, just for my own personal interest. But these conversations, they seem to be sort of like 3 main drivers that keep cropping up. Now, I don't know if this has actually changed because I haven't got that historical data, but number one that seems to be coming to point time and time again is about having satisfaction and getting more enjoyment out of the work that they do. That seems to be the number one factor. Then that's sort of like closely followed by they want the opportunity to be able to continually learn and develop so that they can become the best version in the role that they're doing in that career. And then the third point is contribution. They want to feel as if they've made some kind of positive difference to the day. And that surprised me, because I must admit, when I went into this sort of this learning, I did think, what do they want from their career? It's probably progress in terms of the next step in the rung of the ladder. But it was quite surprising that those 3 elements were sort of like factors 1, 2, and 3, way ahead of wanting that career step.
Gosh, there's so much here, Simon. I know how much you press into great content that develops people, from podcasts you and I have shared, or the books that you share that you're reading. But it's really interesting to hear you say about the satisfaction and engagement, in that I feel that there's actually the opposite of that in many workplaces at the moment. So it's really interesting to hear that people are hungering for that. And another great podcast that I've got to call out, that I know that you'll love, is the Financial Times Working It podcast, because this covers so much of what's happening in workplaces. And I really encourage people to listen to that as well, Working It, with Isabel Berwick. And she's just written another book that I think you'd really like, Simon, called The Future-Proof Career: How to Future-Proof Your Career. But interestingly, in the space that, as you know, that I work in, I love working in, I think when times are uncertain and challenging and financially difficult in many organizations, the things that are getting cut are learning and development. That second point that you made, people are pulling back on that. So it's really interesting, those points that you made. And can I just ask, what's one positive contribution you feel you've made in the last week?
You put me on the spot there.
Sorry, Simon.
Actually, no. I've got a really good example. Actually, funny enough, earlier this week, I actually got a message from somebody I've been having coaching conversations with and doing a bit of mentoring with that individual. And out of the blue this week, I just got a thank you, just come through as a message. Thank you. And I was like, what for? And they said, the numerous conversations that we've been having, you've really helped me through a bit of a challenge. And he said, and through those conversations, I've been able to create a situation where I'm a lot more visible to the right people in my organization. And from that, I also had, because of our conversations, I had the right story to tell them. And from that, it's now that his thoughts and ideas of how to take part of that business forward has been taken up by the executive team, and they want to develop it even further. So this was just that was a great example, I think, for me of, well, as I went back to them, you've made my day. In fact, you've made my week, from that. So that's one of the ways of, what did success look like for Simon Dewis this week, was that thank you from an individual that I've been helping to sort of like, work through that challenge with that individual.
So, and forgive me putting you on the spot. I knew I know we hadn't planned that one, but it just puts the cherry on top of my introduction about you. You're so other-centered, that you've made that massive difference to that person, and indeed executive organization, and you recounting that as your positive contribution just is testament to how you're wired up. So massive thank you for that. And then, when things aren't so positive, when you're not getting the thank yous and things are a bit tough, Simon, what strong steps or indeed habits do you have for yourself?
But I know from your previous podcast, a lot of people talk about going to the gym and things like that. And that's not me. That's not me at all, Dani. I'm not a gym person at all. But I've built in some small steps or changes in behavior, mainly since sort of like going into lockdown and whatever. So I find myself working from home a lot more. I'm a hybrid worker, so I'm sitting in my home office quite a lot. So what I have started to do is build into a routine in my daily sort of like ritual is that, once I'm up and showered and dressed and whatever, I do go for a 40-minute walk every morning just to get a bit of fresh air. But I have found it such a liberating way of sort of like getting prepared for the day, but also just to do that thinking time. And it's where the ideas come from first thing in the morning for me personally. So yeah, when the weather's good in the UK, I try and get out, at least do a 40-minute walk, before the day starts. So that's one habit. The other thing as well, not 7 days a week, but at least Monday to Friday, I'm starting to wean myself off coffee. So that was a big challenge to start off with. It's something again that I read. I'm an avid reader, and I was looking at some of these well-being articles, and I wanted to try and improve my sleep patterns. And I learned that anything taking caffeine after sort of like midday can still have a negative impact. So I'm now trying to wean myself off coffee, and probably I think I've done it actually. I'm probably a year into that process. So I only have a coffee on a Saturday morning and a Sunday morning now.
Gosh.
That's one habit. And as I've mentioned several times, I'm an avid reader. My wife is constantly moaning about the letterbox going and the books going through the letterbox and whatever each week. But yeah, that's one habit that I've sort of like, again, mainly since COVID is picking up, is reading and reading and reading.
Well, fantastic for your mind. And and I thank you for sharing sometimes when you've been on a walk, the beautiful nature, horses that you've seen. It's just and that is just magical for the soul. So real good power habits without you probably recognizing their power habits. Fantastic. Thank you, Simon. And then when it really is tough out there for you, Simon, or in there, maybe it's within you, it's tough, but how do you avoid negative experiences like burnout?
Again, I'll come back to that phrase. It's work in progress. I don't think I've nailed it yet, but although I actually do have a very sophisticated mechanism that I can call upon, and that's Mrs. Dewis. She helps me out quite a lot. She's the best listener I know. And joking aside, I mean, August of this year, we're going to be married for 30 years. So she probably knows me better than anybody else on the planet. And she has this real skill, actually. She can detect things when in advance that I can. So she knows that if things are getting a little bit too much or a little bit too, should we say, overwhelming, she's very good at interjecting and helping me out. Yeah. So hats off to Mrs. Dewis.
Oh, I love that recognition of her. And it was Sheryl Sandberg that said, the most important career decision you'll make. So Sheryl Sandberg, former CEO of Facebook, she said the most important career decision you'll make is your choice of partner.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you chose right.
Yeah, I made a good decision there.
You chose right. Good for her, raising her up too. And then the bigger picture, Simon, the bigger picture with it all, what does success look like for you?
Obviously, in addition to being able to provide for my family, that's sort of like the basic elements. I think I'll come back to the 2 points that I've already raised today, Dani. First, going back to what's the point of my life is about helping individuals and teams grow through collaboration. If I achieve that is success for me. And that example that I used, where someone said thank you to me, I genuinely felt as if I'd had a successful week because I've made a positive impact on somebody. So that's what success looks like for me. That contentment of what you're doing and knowing that someone's benefiting from it. So yeah.
Incredible. And then, Simon, when the going gets really tough, when life does exacerbate you, what is it that keeps you going apart from your good lady? What is it that keeps you going?
I think that curiosity that I have, that inbuilt curiosity helps me, is that, if situations are tough, I try and find, well, what can I learn from this process? What's positive can I take from this situation? So I'm very curious to ask questions to myself, but also of the situation. So that helps me out quite a lot. That inbuilt learning, we talk about strengths earlier on, didn't we? The Clifton strengths, learner is my number 2 strength in terms of my top 5. So yeah, that inquisitive mind to take something, learn from it, and move forward is that helps me get move forward, shall we say, and get over those obstacles.
I like that. And it echoes Nelson Mandela's thinking or philosophy that he said, after 27 years in prison, he said, I never fail. I either win or I learn.
Yeah. So
there you go. You supercharge your inner Nelson Mandela. Well done. And then Simon, I know, all organizations have values, but sometimes they're pretty meaningless. So what values would you say you personally live by?
Again, this is something I've given quite a lot of thought about over the last few years, and I'll come back to the document that I mentioned here is this personal brand board this template that I use. Again, this is something I've slightly tweaked over the years, but I've tried to capture it. I'm a very visual person, so that's why I've created this template, so that I've not only have I got almost like my brand promise, which I've talked about in terms of what's the point of my life, but also what my strengths are. I've captured that information on this template, and also I use a slightly different word rather than core values. It's almost like my core principles, and there's I've got 5 or 6 of those, but just to pick on a few. One of them that sort of like always springs to mind is be generous. And what I mean by that, I'm not talking money, by the way, Dani, here. You'll not see me first at the bar buying a pint for everyone. But what I mean by be generous is be generous with my time, my ideas, and my knowledge. So, this is a good example. You asked if I'd be, open to being a guest on your podcast, and I wanted to be generous with my time and my thoughts and my ideas. So that's a classic example of how I'm trying to live to these core principles. The other one that is top of the list is around own it. So, and what I mean by that is I own my own goals. I set my own goals, but also I own my response to situations. If something good or bad happens, the way in which I respond to it, I need to own up and own that. And then the third bit is own up to mistakes. Like everybody else on the planet, I'm not perfect. I get things wrong, but I need to own up to those mistakes and take accountability for them. So that's one of my other core principles. And then the other one that I wanted to highlight is around have fun. Life is so much better when we're smiling, isn't it? So if I can take that through my journey, in life, and have a little bit of fun as we go through that, then life is a lot easier.
I quite agree, Simon. And often dealing with very difficult situations, I think of course there are times that you cannot add humor to a difficult situation. It's not appropriate, but I think having humor and fun as a vehicle through that is wonderfully powerful. Yeah, so I'm so glad that you said that. And I really like what you said about owning it, as in owning mistakes, owning your responses. And I think so many people are not aware of how in control of their response they are.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, that entirely resonates with me as well. Yeah, totally get it.
So I think that's a really, really powerful statement, and great values or principles, as you say, Simon. So how would you say that those 3 principles keep you fully focused on living the point of your life?
I think in terms of helping individuals and teams grow through that collaboration, I think very much in terms of the be generous. That is probably the dominant value that helps me achieve that, is that, when people reach out to me and ask for, some guidance, some support, I do what I can to make myself available to them. And I love sharing my ideas, and I'm not going to profess to have come up with the ideas myself. I always joke that if I was to create a consultancy company, it would be Begged, Borrowed and Stolen Limited, because, you know, that's all I've done is I've begged, borrowed and stolen ideas from elsewhere. And I just, you know, put a bit of a Simon Dewis twist on them, and I'm more than happy to share them with other people. So that principle or goal, value, really does help me in achieving that statement of helping teams and individuals.
Simon, that is fantastic, because there are so many people actually taking the thinking of Aristotle, Socrates, Tony Robbins, whoever in this space and claiming it as their own. So it's so refreshing that you are, you acknowledge the begged, borrowed and stolen nature of some of this. Very, very humble of
No, I don't think I've had an original idea in my life. It's all been taken from somewhere else and just tweaked a little bit.
So humble of you, Simon. It's honestly a true delight and pleasure to know you. Before we bring this into land, is there anything else you'd like to ask or offer to our audience?
No, obviously, as a fellow strengths coach, what I would say is that, you know, if you do get the opportunity to think about investing in yourself, take the time to try and understand what are your unique strengths. You know, and that can be a simple, you know, a reflective exercise, or it can be going through something a lot more structured and formal and working with, you know, a coach like yourself to understand what your unique strengths are. So that's something that has really sort of like resonated with me since becoming a certified coach, because, you know, that's really helped me, you know, achieve some of my goals. So I'd really recommend that people go through that process. The only other thing that I wanted to say on this is that, you know, you've put me under a bit of pressure today, asking me some intense questions here, Dani, and, you know, and asking me about what does success look like and examples of that. I wanted to turn the tables a little bit, because listening to some of the podcasts before, no one's really asked you this question, but what's the point of your life, Dani?
Simon, thank you. Thank you. Well, if you read my book, which I know you have, you're at the launch. Thank you very, very much. Part of the process. Thank you. You'll certainly find that out. But coming into what you've just said about strengths, actually, Simon, my number one is developer, and the research shows that when we use our strengths, we're 6 times more likely to be engaged at work. And so my number one, developer, means that I have this natural hunger to develop people to their full potential. So I use that every day. I'm totally engaged and energized by what I'm doing. But to answer your question, through the lens of strength, but certainly through the lens of just how I want to operate in my life and what gives me energy, it is to help people powerfully raise their experience of work and daily life. I do not want people to feel not good about their life. I don't want people to not feel good about their life. I want people to know that they are safe when they come to me, and that we're not going to stay in this mediocrity. We're going to move it forward. So that's the point of my life, simply to powerfully raise the experience of work and daily life for people. And thank you, Simon, for being part of that process with me, and thank you for asking that question. Thank you.
You're welcome. And you know, and obviously I had the opportunity to speak with many people that have worked with you firsthand, and I know what you're trying to achieve through the point of your life, you are achieving, because I've spoken to those individuals and had the feedback from them about how impressed they have been and the difference you've made to those individuals in their life. So yeah, well done.
Well, thank you, Simon. And I take my hat off to that thank you that you've received, because you are doing it too, you know, what you're contributing as well. And I think, you know, I'm really, you know, being honest and going a bit of a curveball here, I'm really proud to be part of our coaching community, because there are some great people in the coaching community, and they are really truly giving their lives to do this for people. You know, case in point, I spoke to one this week who's just on the point of burnout themselves, just trying so hard to keep the business and what they're doing alive in coaching and developing others. You know, nothing is easy. It is all hard, but I'm really proud to be part of this community, that we support each other, we strengthen each other, we help each other, and so it's great to know you through that, Simon, and massive thank you for everything that you're doing.
You're very welcome, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be on your podcast and making it so easy for me. Thank you.
Well, Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think we're in a place where we can bring the podcast for this week into land. Simon Dewis, it is my absolute joy to know you. And thank you so much again from the bottom of my heart for joining me. I'll tag Simon in so people can contact you directly if anything that you've said has resonated. I hope that's okay, Simon.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
And thank you to our wonderful audience for joining another episode of What's the Point? I hope you found Simon as insightful and riveting to get to know as I do. Thank you, Simon, and thank you, audience, for listening to What's the Point?